guys, this is Svetlana from Comic Cosplay, and today I'm going to build something truly legendary. So, Square Enix asked me to bring one of the legendary weapons from their upcoming game Outriders to life and show you how to do it. So, their weapon designers are, I would say, quite creative. Like, one of the weapons actually looks like a piece of meat, and there are plenty of many very interesting designs, and my choice was actually the Grim Marrow. So the Grim Marrow is like if you take a wonderful shiny sparkling crystal and put it into the ripped out spine and bones of a demon and put it together. It's perfect for a weapon. So this is what I'm going to build today. I'm going to show you how I created the whole thing completely from scratch. And yeah, this was actually one of my most challenging projects. So I promise this will be interesting. Outriders, the game, is coming out on April 1st, and you can also play the demo right now actually, and you can even get the Grim Marrow already in the demo. So in case you already got it, let me know in the comments, because then I will be very jealous, since I myself played the demo only a few hours, since I was busy crafting my very own real-life Grim Marrow, which I think is pretty cool as well. Yeah, I will actually keep this video very simple and beginner-friendly, and I basically will just throw everyday stuff together, maybe except the electronics. And since I'm pretty sure that some of you will also have questions on how to do electronics or build weapons out of EVA foam, I have just the perfect books for you regarding to this topic. So I made a book about advanced lights, which is about animated LEDs, which show you how to get started, and also a book about how to turn simple EVA foam into amazing weapons. So in case you have any questions, just check out comiccosplay.com for more tips and tricks. Thank you a lot for your support, and now let's start with the video. So here is a 3D rendering of the Grim Marrow. This video was actually my main reference for the whole project. As you can see, it's very cute, very ugly, and very amazing. Based on this model, Benny drew me a blueprint in Adobe Illustrator. You can download it from my website as well, by the way. He tried to catch all the details, but it was obviously quite challenging. Once done, he printed it out for me in a few size variations. Then I taped all pages roughly together next. This version here was 130 cm long. As you can see, Benny printed out 3 blueprints in different sizes I could choose from. My final choice was 110 cm long. It just felt natural in my hands and fit to my own body size. Zelda, meanwhile, waited for some playtime. Benny also printed a tiny version, so I drew in some ideas I had in mind. First, I wanted to shape the naked core of the blaster. For that, I wanted to separate the build into 3 individual pieces. This would make it much more easier to build up the details, but also to prime and paint the prop later. For stability, I wanted to place a PVC pipe through the whole build. So Benny drew me a new blueprint, but this time it was only the shape of the inner core. Here you can already see how I would place the PVC pipe, and once I cut out the shape, how I would separate all parts. Then the first crafting step was to prepare the PVC pipe. I had 2 halves, which I would connect with a thinner pipe in the middle. This one was just glued in with super glue. Then I drilled some holes, glued in some neodymium magnets, and this is basically how both pipes were then connected. Magnet magic! Next, I traced all parts of the core blueprint onto 10mm high density foam. As always, you can find links for all used materials and tools in the video description. You see, I used here several layers since I wanted to build up some thickness. I cut all parts with a simple utility knife, by the way. I really wanted to keep this as easy as possible. Once done, this was basically the puzzle for my base build. The PVC pipe would be placed in the middle, and the foam should completely cover it. Let's see if this plan would work out. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I also wanted to add a trigger mechanic. I found this perfect switch button and basically just cut a hole in the middle layer of my core. Then I freed some space and simply hot glued this thing on. Super professional. The wire was then secured with hot glue, and this is how my really simple trigger worked. Hidden inside the foam, it would look like a real one. I love this super simple solution. Next, it was time to glue all layers together. As always, I used contact cement for this job. Afterwards, I placed the PVC pipe and secured it with a good amount of hot glue. Then I stacked the next part, glued it on as well, and attached then the last piece. This was my finished base. Can you already see the Grim Marrow here? Well, probably not yet, right? Just keep on watching. Following this, I added a thin layer of foam and began roughly carving out the shape a bit. Just some quick and dirty work. Now I wanted to light up the whole crystal area. I thought it would be pretty cool, and I just enjoy adding LEDs to everything. To control the upcoming LEDs, I ordered a Feather M4, a prop maker feather wing, a speaker, a button, and some RGB LED strips, all from adafruit.com. I already used the setup for my light up bowler hammer in the past, by the way. This build is actually based on the Burning Fire Wizard staff tutorial from Aaron St. Blaine. I'll put a link in the video description. However, I adjusted the code a lot and made sure it worked with the new trigger. Now the LED installing fun could begin. To be honest with you though, it wasn't actually that much fun after a while. Gluing all the LED strips and soldering them together took forever. However, I want to be always extra power saving, so I light up only the area that needed to be lit up. This required a lot of extra work though. Therefore, while this looks fast and simple in the video, this step took me actually 3 full days of work. In total, these are 376 LEDs if you are curious. Oh, and for additional stability, I also added a further PVC pipe here, by the way. So here was the final test. Almost 400 LEDs. I used here a crawling animation, and once I pulled the trigger, the speaker played a sound and the lights turned white. The code wasn't done yet though, but the first test looked good. Next, I had to prepare the grip part with a heated up PVC pipe. Once hot enough, I bent it and cut the end into shape. Then I placed some markings, cut in some holes, and covered the pipe with a massive amount of hot glue. Hot glue is every cosplayer's best friend. Afterwards, it was time to build the ammo drum. This one was made mainly out of 5mm EVA foam. I traced a rough cylinder pattern onto the material and cut all parts out. Then I glued the walls together and carefully attached the smaller circle. For the upcoming wire connection, I marked and cut out a square at the top. Later, I would pull all wires through there and connect the circuit and the battery inside the ammo drum. First, however, I had to place the speaker. It would actually go in the middle of the drum. I thought here it wouldn't be very noticeable. The hot glue gun was perfect to secure it safely. And yes, the construction was very wobbly at this point. Therefore, I began building in walls to fix this issue. To reach the electronics, I also cut out a window in this section. Then I carefully began connecting everything and oh wait, I forgot to add the power button. Hot glued it in as well. Now you can also see the walls I placed inside the ammo drum. Next, I could finally close it. To attach the build, one of my solutions were simply PVC pipes. I secured them with hot glue as well. For the little window here, I placed additional foam pieces to the inside. The door got a tiny grip, and well, this is how I closed the drum. Very simple, but also efficient. So, and this was the whole base set together. As you can see, the trigger worked perfectly. Here is the power button, and there is the speaker. Here I quickly wanted to show you how the setup works. I actually totally forgot to record that I added some magnets, but you can see them here. The wires were connected to the circuit in the ammo drum, which I can detach from the blaster. The LED strips and trigger are connected with a few connection plugs. And the front and the stock of the blaster can be separated as well. I already knew that this blaster would be a monster, so working on 3 individual parts would be just far easier than having this one massive crazy thing in front of me. Now for the diffusion of the LEDs, I used 3mm plaster soti. I traced the light up area onto the material, cut it out. Oh right, I secured the wires with duct tape. And then I hot glued the foam onto the blaster. All the hot glue. Here I also placed this middle thing with contact cement. And finally the fun part could begin, creating the crystals. You were probably super curious about this part, right? Well, for this job, I ordered a bunch of acrylic resin decoration crystals in different colors on Amazon. To get a natural gradient, I decided to dye a few of them with red eye dye poly. I threw the crystals into a tea infuser, dunked them for a few seconds into the cooking pot, and rinsed them with cold water. The difference was really cool. By using different crystals and different dipping times, I got plenty of shades in red, pink and purple. These were just perfect. So this was my crystal color spectrum. Then it was time for some burnt fingers hot glue action. Now you probably wonder, did she really just hot glued thousands of crystals piece by piece onto the foam? You bet I did! And it took me only 3 days. But through the power of video editing, you can see all of that in just a few seconds. The crystals also made the gap between the front and the stock pretty much invisible. And yeah, this added quite some weight to the blaster, but I absolutely loved the result. Here is also a little light test with a new blinking animation and the first layer of crystals. So far so good with the sparkly stuff. Next it was time for the organic spiky and bony part. My material of choice was EVA foam and foam clay. To make the clay sticky, I had to add a bit of water to the surface of my blaster. Then I spread the material all around the light up crystals. I was actually super worried that the water or the clay would damage the circuit. That's why I always worked with the lights turned on. This way I would instantly see any issues and could fix them right away. Water and electronics don't really like each other, you know. Afterwards, I began sculpting on the bony vines all over the crystals. I should add here that foam clay is one of my absolute favorite crafting materials and I really enjoy to work with it. This part was very chill and I just tried to stay kind of close to the reference. For the spikes, I cut some triangles out of 5mm high density foam. I glued them together along the edges and got these lovely shapes at the end. Next, I smoothed out the seams with my Dremel, added some hot glue and attached them onto the Grim Marrow. Yes, this project required a lot of hot glue. I actually have no idea how many sticks I used, but they were plenty. For some areas, I also used Benny's blueprint for reference. I traced those shapes directly onto foam, cut them out and used them as a base for further sculpting work. As you can also see, I placed the blueprint underneath my blaster so I could directly use it as a reference to place the spikes properly. Then I covered them with water as well and used foam clay to smooth out the transitions. I added some clay here and added some clay there. Oh, and by the way, at some point I actually had to open up the stock and add another PVC pipe for additional stability. The crystal just added a lot of weight and the step was an easy fix. Next, it was time to add the first bony structure. Here I also used the blueprint as a reference and cut the shape directly out. Once cut out, I grabbed my hot glue gun and spread the sticky stuff onto the foam clay but also onto the crystals. Then some clay to hide the edges. So far so good. I was already really happy with the front, but there was still a massive amount of work left. So I had to do every step twice. Well, except for this grip thingy here. At least this one was unique. As you might guess, it actually doesn't withstand any force. So after I covered it with more foam and more clay, it stayed only decorative. Just don't touch it. And then after adding more veins, this is how the other side looked like. Next, I began working on the stock. I used the blueprint of the core and traced on the shape of the spine to 5mm EVA foam. Afterwards, I glued on the cutout material to the back of the stock. For a pretty transition, I used foam clay but separated it with a simple playing card. Well, and then I covered the whole back of the Grim Marrow with more clay. Now the first layer of the ribs. This part here was pretty complicated. I cut out a bunch of ribs and added a little deepening in the middle. These were then filled with contact cement and banded once the glue dried. I shaped rib after rib this way and dremeled the edges at the end. Next, I attached each one of them with hot glue onto the spine. As you can see, each rib looked slightly different. I think this made it more organic and natural. I also worked with foam clay to sculpt on a smooth transition. You can surely imagine that this step took quite a while as well. Well, and then I had to add a second layer of ribs, again with the blueprint reference. This one needed a nice curved shape though. A simple trick is to cover a thinner layer of foam with contact cement, place it carefully onto the back and bend it while connecting both parts. Then I just had to get rid of the excess material, dremel a bit and attach the perfectly curved ribs onto the Grim Marrow. Following this, I only added some extra foam clay for some sculpted on details. For rib layer number 3, I needed a further template from my blueprint. Again, I traced it onto foam, cut it out, and this was the final result. Then I placed some markings and filled the area with contact cement. And here you go. I used then foam clay to fill out the gaps and add some volume on the top. The next step was finally the end of the stock. There was actually a hole in the middle, so I had to be a bit creative here. After I got rid of a huge piece of foam, I built up a wall on top of the remaining material. A little bit of foam was placed here, and then I closed this rough construction. I know I surely could plan this way ahead, but often it's better to keep things simple, especially at the beginning of a project. And as you can see, it was really not a big deal to fix this issue. The result looked also pretty fine, I would say. So, this was how the stock looked so far. One more layer of ribs was still missing though. Now, quickly back to the ammo drum. Here a lot of detail work was still waiting for me. I used the 3D rendering as my main reference and just glued on 5 and 3mm foam here and there. This gave the drum also additional stability. For the back, I cut out some rings and arranged them around the speaker. They also helped a lot to hide the electronics window a little bit better. This part was quite simple. Oh, and these ones were supposed to be metal clamps. Hope they look like metal clamps. So this was my ammo drum so far. Next, we are coming to rib layer number 4. This one was really challenging though. I had to place this foam part somehow like this. Okay, I got my foam ribs ready and glued on a base onto the drum for them. As you remember, this part had to stay detachable. Then I glued on rib by rib and arranged them around the blaster. Again, foam clay did a great job on the transition. Afterwards, I cut out a 5mm EVA foam base for the organic part. I surely could also directly sculpt it on with foam clay. But having a foam base as a guide just helped me to stay close to the reference. So this part got then covered with clay, and here is the result. This was only one side though. Oh my, I was still not done. For the middle section, I used good old duct tape. I drew the shape roughly on, traced it onto foam, and got then the next puzzle pieces. Okay, the next step was a bit tricky. Before gluing the middle parts on, I placed some baking paper. This helped me to keep on using foam clay for the sculpting part, but prevented from sticking to the rest of the blaster. Then, once I was done, I could easily detach the ammo drum and got a lovely transition here. Now it was time for the remaining details. Here I needed a little bit more volume and there a few more thicker veins. Then I began sanding. This made the foam nice and smooth and all the nasty seams, bumps and gaps disappear. This was the result so far, but it might be hard to see in the video. Next, I had to roughen up the surface again though. To turn my plain foam into a believable and ugly bone structure, I had to Dremel in a lot of texture and imperfections. I used here a simple grinding tip and just tried to do some rough and dirty work. Once done with the stock, I repeated the same steps on the ammo drum. Aside of the little dots, I also Dremeled in growing marks with a different sanding tip. It took me a full day to give the whole blaster this texture. You know, just in case you're curious how long such a project takes. Well, this stuff requires a lot of time and patience. Once done, I cleaned up the area with my vacuum cleaner. But I also used an airbrush to blow out the very last foam dust particles. And finally, I grabbed my heat gun to smooth out the rough foam. Oh yeah, last but not least, I totally forgot to add this further PVC pipe to the barrel. Well, and here you can see again how all 3 parts could be connected quite easily. Just had to hide the wires and done. So this is a closer look at the Dremeled in surface and the Grim Marrow build in all of its glory. 3 weeks of work so far, but we are nearly done. And this was me, super happy, super proud. My Grim Marrow was already pretty and sparkly and ugly and gory at the same time. So now, finally, it was time for the priming and painting. For the priming, I chose Flex Bond. However, I mixed it with black acrylic paint. After mixing it well, I got a dark primer that would seal the foam, but also gave me a basic paint job at the same time. I'm such a genius! Then I began applying a thick layer onto the foam. As you can see, this allowed me also to prime everything around the crystals, even without using any kind of masking tape. I obviously had to be quite careful here though. The next 2 layers were then sprayed on with Gummidip, which is like the German version of Plastidip. This was just faster and I was able to reach every single corner of my foam build super quick. The foam was completely primed with 2 thick layers of Flex Bond by hand though. The painting began with Benny airbrushing silver to the ammo drum. All organic parts, however, had to be painted by hand. Benny and I used Liquitex colors, which are pretty covering. But yeah, it was still a lot of work. At least for the stock, I was able to use my airbrush. For a little bit more texture, I still grabbed the acrylics at the end though. It's all about the details. Next, it was time for some shading. We tried to stay close to the reference, and this one actually used a lot of grey, but also dirty yellow. So we dabbed on grey all over the bony structure and hoped it would look natural at the end. Then also some yellow spots. At this point it looked a little bit weird, but I trusted the reference and Benny's painting skills. While he actually did the majority of the painting work, he is also the one holding the camera when we record our scenes. So it pretty much looks like I painted everything. At the end I was also very busy cutting Minna's paw fluff. Benny then did the final and very texture popping paint layer with a creamy white. I absolutely loved the effect and he did such a great job here. Once done, I grabbed a matte spray varnish and applied 2 thick protective layers onto the paint job. The stock and the armor drum very easy. For the front part, however, Benny sprayed the varnish into the spray can cup, got some liquid varnish and then applied it with a brush all around the crystals. Next, I got rid of all the masking tape and coverings and freed the crystals. It was also time to glue on the foam trigger to the switch. And last but not least, I also added some additional crystals to build up the structure even further. This way the result just looked even more interesting and the diffusion was greatly improved. And then, after 4 weeks of hard work, I could finally connect the plugs one last time, hide them in the ammo drum, and complete the whole build to see the Grim Marrow in all its glory. Here it was finished. As you can see, I adjusted the animation one last time and absolutely love the result now. It looks so shiny and glittery, but also super scary and disgusting. It's by far my favorite weapon design from Outriders, and I really hope that maybe the concept artist will notice my work. I still could not find out who made the design, but I hope you are proud. So, this is my lovely baby. I hope you really enjoyed the making of video of my Grim Marrow. I think it turned out really pretty. I'm very proud. And yes, it's not perfect because it was just, you know, like it's not a perfect 3D print and like, but I still think I got pretty close to the 3D model. And I'm very happy with all the crystals and the bones. And yeah, I think, as I said at the beginning, it's like perfect combination for something awesome. And to make this whole project even better, I also will make a fitting outfit. So I will actually pick the outfit from the character in the key art of Outriders. I think it looks pretty cool. I mean, like, it's plain, it's simple. So all the focus is like on this beauty here, and then I will do also a photo shoot. I think it will be really cool. I cannot wait to share more of this project with you in the next video. And yeah, until then, if you have any questions, leave me a comment down below. And yeah, as always, you can find all the tools and materials I used in the video description, right in the video description. And yeah, as always, like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, support us maybe also in Patreon, and see you very soon with a super epic outfit from Outriders. Oh, and since I know 50% of all the questions will be actually how heavy the Grim Marrow is, well, it is a quarter of a corgi to be precise. So thanks for watching. Bye bye.